Direct News TV. December 26, 2023. Israel-Hamas war live, death toll nears 21,000 in Gaza. According to Gaza's health ministry, 241 people were killed in the past 24 hours and 382 injured. The Israeli military says the Air Force hit 100 targets in the south of the Gaza Strip in 24 hours. Houthi attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea. Dozens of cargo ships have been stranded at the port of Djibouti for days, with Houthi attacks bringing maritime traffic to a standstill. Palestinian detainees describe horrific torture by Israeli forces. There has been outrage at recent footage showing Palestinian prisoners rounded up and stripped naked in a sports stadium in Gaza, with the UN sounding the alarm about Israel's treatment of detainees. Palestinian men and boys, among the thousands arrested by Israeli forces in recent months, have told Al Jazeera about the torture and humiliation they endured while in custody. They treated us like dogs. They forced us to bark, threatening to beat us if we didn't. We did whatever they asked because if we didn't they would beat us badly, one man said. Gaza war source of 2023's immense and avoidable suffering, WHO chief. In his yearly review, World Health Organization Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus cited some positive developments in 2023, including the end of COVID-19 as a public health emergency of global concern and increased attention to the health impacts of climate change. He also listed the war in Gaza as the source of 2023's immense and avoidable suffering and mentioned fighting in Sudan, Ukraine, Ethiopia, and Myanmar. Israeli raids expand near Tulkarem, West Bank. Israeli forces have stormed the towns of Aller, Adel, and Saida in the Sharawiyah area, north of Tulkarem in the occupied West Bank. Local Palestinian news agencies said the Israeli army raided the streets and neighborhoods of the towns and searched several homes and agricultural lands. Confrontations reportedly broke out between Palestinian men and Israeli forces, who fired live bullets and tear gas canisters. UN's new Gaza aid coordinator has a tough job ahead of her. Sigrid Kaag's work is cut out for her. Her task now is very difficult, primarily because the UN Security Council resolution that was passed on Friday states that her role or her mandate is to facilitate, coordinate and monitor a scaling up of aid into Gaza. There's one problem though. Nowhere in this resolution does it call for an immediate ceasefire, and that, according to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, is what is needed to scale up humanitarian aid to Gaza. Kaag has a lot of experience and she certainly has the backing of the Secretary-General. But until there is a ceasefire or at least some sort of demand for a pause in fighting, it's very hard to see how she will scale up aid going into an area being bombed almost relentlessly by Israeli forces. The best way for the U.S. to constrain Israel is through public pressure, analyst. Speaking to Al Jazeera, Andrea Desi, an assistant professor of international relations at the American University of Rome, said the U.S. is working behind the scenes to constrain Israel in a strategy likely to prove ineffective. The United States, and the Biden administration, is moving on the same strategy of not criticizing Israel or not showing daylight between the U.S. and Israeli positions in public, Desi said. It is moved by this belief that the best way to influence Israel is through back-channel negotiations or back-channel pressure. However, the history of the U.S.-Israel relationship has shown repeatedly for many, many decades, that the best way to restrain Israel is indeed through public pressure and public criticism, especially given the considerations of what we have been seeing for the past 80-plus days in Gaza, he said. He added the only way towards a diplomatic solution is an impartial third party stepping in and being the grown-up in the room and compelling a ceasefire. Israeli forces raid towns in the occupied West Bank. Our colleagues at Al Jazeera Arabic report that Israeli forces have stormed two towns in the occupied West Bank, Kafan, north of the city of Tulkarem, and Jayas, northeast of the city of Qalqilia. Israeli pacifist teenager sentenced to 30 days in prison. Tal Mitnick, an 18-year-old Israeli, has been sentenced to 30 days in military prison for refusing to enlist in the army in protest of Israel's war in Gaza. Violence cannot solve the situation, neither by Hamas nor by Israel. There is no military solution to a political problem, he wrote in a statement explaining his decision. Mitnick was arrested earlier today at the Tel Has-Homer military base and immediately sentenced, according to Mezervat, an organization that supports Israeli youth who refuse to take part in military service. NRC says forced displacement of Palestinians, atrocity crime. The Norwegian Refugee Council, NRC, has warned that any efforts by Israel to expel and permanently relocate Palestinians within or from Gaza would represent a grave violation of international law. The forcible transfer and deportation of a significant population across borders, lacking any guarantees of return, would constitute a serious breach of international law, amounting to an atrocity crime, said Jan Egeland, the NRC's Secretary General. Pushing for the irreversible deportation of hundreds of thousands directly undermines resolving this conflict amid decades of a refugee crisis, he continued. The international community must unequivocally condemn any forced displacement of Palestinians, whether within or outside the Gaza Strip. Israeli military operations in Gaza are driving civilians closer to the southern borders, and the NRC said the alarming prospect of mass deportations is a consequence of recent media coverage and explicit declarations by Israeli officials supporting such deportations. Yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was quoted by media calling for the voluntary migration of Palestinians from Gaza. Iraq militia pledges more attacks on American forces. Two Iraqi security sources confirmed that overnight U.S. strikes targeted the headquarters of the Iraqi armed group Kataib Hezbollah in the city of Hilla, south of Baghdad. One militiaman was killed and 16 were wounded, the unnamed sources told the Reuters news agency. Iran-aligned Kataib Hezbollah criticized the Iraqi government's position for condemning militia attacks against U.S.-led coalition targets. We warn those with weak souls, from the highest level to the lowest, not to test our patience, militia official Abu Ali al-Askari said. In a clear challenge to the government of Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, Askari pledged to continue attacks against U.S. forces. U.S. confirms downing Houthi missiles and drones in Red Sea. The U.S. military's Central Command, CENTCOM, says U.S. warships and planes shot down 12 one-way attack drones, 3 anti-ship ballistic missiles, and 2 land attack cruise missiles fired by the Houthis in the Red Sea during 10 hours today. The attacks resulted in no reported injuries and no ships were damaged, CENTCOM wrote on X. The Iran-backed Houthis have been waging a campaign of missile and drone attacks from Yemen on commercial shipping vessels in the Red Sea in retaliation for Israel's war on Gaza. Israel issues India travel warning for citizens after blast. Israel's National Security Council warned its citizens to exercise caution in India following an explosion near the Israeli embassy in New Delhi. The Level 2 travel advisory cautioned Israelis in the country against displaying Israeli flags or symbols, to avoid crowded gatherings, and to maintain a high level of alertness. Circumstances surrounding the blast, which occurred at 5:20 p.m., 11:50 Greenwich Mean Time, near the Israeli embassy in the Indian capital, remain unclear and an investigation is underway. No one was harmed, Israeli authorities said. France, gravely concerned over Israel's promise to intensify Gaza fighting. The statement from the Foreign Ministry comes as several of Israel's allies have called on the country to move to lower-intensity operations and to better protect civilians. France was among the first Western countries to appeal for a ceasefire. Paris strongly reiterates its call for an immediate truce leading to a ceasefire, the Foreign Ministry said. The French government also condemned the systematic bombing that has again left many civilian victims in recent days. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has given a speech. Here are some of his main talking points. What is happening in Gaza is greater and more horrific than the 1948 Nakba. We want a complete and comprehensive halt to the fighting in Gaza and the delivery of aid. The U.S. responds every time with a veto against a vote to stop the aggression against Gaza. Netanyahu and his government plan to get rid of the Palestinians. Israel wants to displace Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Our efforts towards Palestinian reconciliation have never stopped. We value the Egyptian and Jordanian positions that reject displacement. Hope is coming and Gaza will return to what it was and better, God willing. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share and subscribe.